All right, welcome. Here we are, week 5, one of the biggest weekends of the year. Super excited. What's up, Jason?
Hey Sam, how we doing today?
Doing well. So this is one of the special weekends where someone becomes a fantasy football millionaire from playing daily fantasy football. And it's a big field this year. We got 93,000 people with a $27 entry on DraftKings Millionaire Maker Contest. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it's going to take to win this year. I think you're going to have a perfect lineup, and this means you're not going to be able to punt any position. I'm not sure that the winner's going to have a stack. If they do, I think it'll be a small stack with a quarterback and a wide receiver. I think that the winning lineup's going to have between 240 and 250 points. With the softening of the salaries on DraftKings this week, I think you're going to see a ton of teams, and all your teams are going to look great. They're all going to be having superstars. And I think that the difference is going to be a defensive selection that's going to make 2 to 3 touchdowns, and that's going to be the difference in the game. Jason, I know you agree with this, but I feel like we have to find advantages in order to win a contest like this. And you speak.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
absolutely. I agree with that, and like you said, the stacks have been much less effective than we've seen them be in the past, and a lot of that has to do with this newly reconfigured salary structure. So that plays a big difference. Another thing, and I talked a little bit about this in one of the new articles that you'll see on the website this week in the contrarian picks, is that you can get ahead with the contrarian pick, but truly you do have to find the perfect contrarian pick in order for it to work. You have to find that minimally used guy that can give you high production at a low price so that you can get all those studs in there. Because again, like you said, it's about got to be a perfect lineup this year in order to take the top prize in any of these GPPs.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, contrarian picks are picks that are against the grain, that a lot of people aren't owning this player, so you get to create that advantage and get ahead if your player does well because other people don't own them. So one of the ways to find contrarian picks is by staying on top of injury news and matchups. And so what you need to do this week is stay on there's a few key players that I think you need to pay attention to. One is Calvin Johnson. Okay, it might be tough to determine what he's going to do this week just because they used him as a decoy last week, and even if he plays, you don't know if he's going to play well. But if you get the feeling that Calvin Johnson isn't ready this week, Golden Tate is a superb pickup. The second is Ben Tate. Okay, this guy, even if he plays, there's a good chance he's not going to make it through the first quarter. And word out of Browns camp is that Crowell is the number 2 back, and he's been outperforming West. And so Crowell is super cheap. He's at 3,400. He could step up into a role. There's one other big one that I wanted to share with you, and that's Andre Johnson. This just came up on Friday, his ankle. If Andre Johnson is not playing, Hopkins, to me, is a plug-and-play. What do you think, Jason, against the Cowboys?
Yeah, definitely. They're vulnerable. I think it's going to be, a decently high-scoring affair. The Cowboys' offense seems to be finally firing on all cylinders. They've obviously had the run game going, but we saw the pass attack in full effect last week. So they're going to need to put some points up on the board to stay in that game against the Cowboys. Now, we've already seen it this year, and we've seen it a little bit in Arizona as well. Hopkins, just like Michael Floyd in Arizona, looks like he's starting to take over that number 1 wide receiver role. He's got good chemistry with Fitzpatrick. He's put up some big games, and he's been PPR gold this year. So absolutely, if Andre Johnson's limited, can't play, or practicing limited, maybe in that decoy role, I think Hopkins just about has to go in your lineup.
Yeah, it's really important to monitor your lineup up until kickoff and monitor that injury news. I also feel there's going to be a big fantasy points winner out of Jacksonville in the wide receiver position. I'm not quite sure who that is. Ace Sanders is coming back. He's probably going to play the slot over Mike Brown. He hasn't been performing. Allen Hurns looks like their big play guy. He did it in week 1. He should have had a couple touchdowns last couple weeks and just fumbled the ball, stepped out of bounds. So they're going to have to play against Steelers, and I think they're going to be throwing a lot to come back. So that might be a place to look.
Definitely. And real quick on the Golden Tate thing too, something to keep in mind there between both of them is that Golden Tate's also came up on Thursday that he has a little bit of a hamstring issue. So just all around with your Lions options, you want to keep an eye on those guys because again, that's going to be a pretty decent matchup for him. And if Johnson can't go and Tate's healthy enough to play and playing on the field, you're going to want to get him in your lineup.
For sure. All right, let's talk about what we think is going to happen this week a little bit in the field. I think there's going to be a ton of action on Roethlisberger. I think everyone knows they pick against Jacksonville. They're terrible against the run. Don't let the San Diego game fool you. They're terrible against the pass. They're terrible all around. The one thing Jacksonville can do is they can sack the quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this week. Steelers' line is decimated. They could put some pressure on Roethlisberger. I think they have the highest sacks out of any other team, I guess, in the last few games. They've got 12 sacks from their line. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think people are going to be big on Rivers going against the Jets secondary, but it's the lowest over-under out of Vegas, so keep an eye on that. I do think that Rivers, if anyone, will put up points there. I don't think they're going to be able to run against the Jets, but maybe. What do you think, Jason? One wide receiver out of the Chargers camp?
I think so, and I think at this point, if you want to be a bit contrarian, you could go with Eddie Royal, maybe out on a limb and go Malcolm Floyd, but I think you'd really probably want to go, if you're looking for somebody that's going to be safer, Keenan Allen. He got back in a big way last week, 135 yards, 10 receptions. He's gonna be the number one on that team for a long time, and so just the safety element there. Look, they're not going to be able to cover him. He's going to put up some points, and I think if you're looking for a safe option from the Chargers camp, yeah, absolutely, Allen's your guy. They're not going to be able to run the ball, so they're going to have to get it down the field.
Yeah, and Rivers does like those short passes, high completion percentage, and Allen runs those slants really well. So I also think people are going to be big on Breeze. I know we've got them in a couple of our lineups. He's going to bounce back at home. They're going to put it on Tampa Bay. I also see him connecting with Jimmy Graham and picking him up after his last game. He had a bit of a rough game. So just one more point before we get into our lineups. I do feel like there are going to be some winning money lineups with Austin Davis, Joe Flacco, and maybe Bortles. So don't get caught up. What you need out of your quarterback is 300 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns to stay in the game, and those guys can really free up some salary for your other players. So with that said, Jason, let's jump into it and get into your optimal lineup for Week 5.
All right. Well, hey, look, I've got some gambles in my lineup this week, but I wanted to save a little space to spend a little bit of money because, like you said, it's all about finding that perfect lineup this week. So I took some calculated risks, and here's what I came up with. For my quarterback, I am going Drew Brees, just like you said. I expect him to bounce back in a big way. Tampa Bay's not been able to defend the pass well. He's going to have a big game. Got to go Matt Forte against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers have been awful against the run the past 2 weeks. I want to say that they've been giving up about 160 to 70 yards. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I know that it's over 150 yards per game over the past 2 weeks, and that's not been against amazing running backs. The biggest difference, I think, here is that we don't have Greg Hardy, and you're seeing that that's really affected that front seven stopping the run. So I think Forte is a good play. And for that reason, I also went with Jennings. Same deal in Atlanta. They cannot stop the run. Jennings has been a monster, and that offense is finally starting to click a little bit better for the Giants. So I think at the price that you're going to pay for Jennings this week, you've got to get him in a lineup. Already talked a little bit about Keenan Allen. Think he's the safest of the Chargers options, so I've got him in my lineup. Went with Antonio Brown. Again, that tasty matchup against Jacksonville. You can't pass him up. He is absolute PPR gold. He is expensive, but he is worth it. He is rarely ever disappointed me, and again, I can't see how you cannot start him in a matchup like this. Now, here's one of my calculated risks. I went Louis Murphy Jr. Now, we talked a little bit about this on our Thursday podcast. We have no Mike Evans down there. Austin Seferian-Jenkins is working his way back into that role, and Vincent Jackson really hasn't looked great so far. Now, obviously, last year, Mike Glennon and Vincent Jackson had a pretty decent connection, but I think this year you can see that Louis Murphy Jr. can fill in that role, and he did it last week pretty well when Evans was gone. So keep an eye on that, and that could be a good savings place. He's only $3,000 right now. Another one of those calculated risks is my tight end, Clay Harbor. Talked about this one. They're going to need somebody to pass that ball to down in Jacksonville. They've got no Mercedes Lewis until Week 12, and Clay Harbor filled that void nicely last week, catching 9 passes. So I think that he could have another big week. I think that this could bode well for him because they're still kind of decimated. There's still some injuries down there in that Jacksonville receiving corps. They're not all 100%. Flexing Andrew Hawkins. Andrew Hawkins has been excellent in PPR formats. He seems to be the number one receiver, even though you've got Miles Austin up there in Cleveland. He's been excellent. Hasn't found the end zone yet, but that could easily stop this weekend against the Titans. And then lastly, the Lions. Like you said, you've got to find a defense that is going to put you up some big points this week. Now, you've got the Chargers, and you've got the Steelers. You've got a few other teams out there that I talked about in some of the articles that have some nice matchups. But the Lions are the number one defense right now overall. And they're facing a quarterback who's up till this week not taken a first-team rep, just joined his team on August 3rd. That's Kyle Orton of the Buffalo Bills. So I really, really like the opportunity that they've got there to score some points.
Yeah, I like the Lions too. You make a good point with the new quarterback, Orton. I mean, he's a veteran, but he hasn't got a lot of reps, and they put a ton of pressure on the quarterback, so you could definitely get some turnovers, and they're at home, which I like in a defense. I agree with you on Jennings. He's a must play. He's going to be heavily owned. Great salary. He's going to bounce back. The Falcons' defense is awful against the run, and even though he's a he's going to be high percentagely owned. He's worth it. He's going to put up points, 5,500. He frees up cap. And Antonio Brown has just been killing it. Once again, he's going to be highly owned, but he's worth it again, and he's going to be put up points. And Breeze and Forte are also great. I do think you're taking some nice gambles with Harbor and Hawkins. They're going to have to find the end zone for you to make this lineup work, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then Murphy Jr., I think he's the number one in Tampa Bay right now. Okay, Vincent Jackson looks awful. He's slow. He's hurt. And we saw Glennon hook up with Murphy Jr. last week quite a bit. He got him for 11 targets, caught 9 balls for 99 yards. He's going to find the end zone, and they're going to have to throw to come back from the Saints. So I like that pick as well. All right, moving over to my lineup. Here we go. This is it, the winning lineup for $1 million. Okay, I'm going with Joe Flacco. People really aren't a fan of Joe Flacco for whatever reason, but the guy puts up numbers. Last week, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's got the second highest over/under this week. They're in the Dome in Indianapolis. They're going to have to throw to keep up with Indy, and I think he puts up some nice points. Steve Smith Sr. has been really showing up for him. We spoke about Rashad Jennings. He's plug and play. You have to get him in your lineup. I'm not jumping off the Murray bandwagon. He's just been killing it. I think it continues against Houston, and I know he's expensive, but he's worth it to me. Same thing with Antonio Brown. He's going to be highly owned, super expensive, but worth it. At a point per reception on DraftKings, he puts up a ton of points. Hopkins, this is mainly contingent on Andre Johnson, but he's still a good play even if Andre's playing as a decoy or something. This could be a big day for Hopkins, and he's cheap. Another guy that could go in this same slot is Kelvin Benjamin. He's at the same salary. And then we got Louis Murphy Jr. We spoke about him, big on him this week. He's $3,000. He opens up a ton of room and allowed me to get Julius Thomas, which I feel like Manning's going to hit that 500 TD mark. Is that what he said? Is it 500 or 400?
500.
500 TD mark in a big way. I think it's going to be a big day in Denver. One of the highest over-unders. I think Patrick Peterson's going to cover up Demaryius Thomas, and it's going to open up Emmanuel Sanders and Julius Thomas. So I'm looking for a big game from him. Okay, here's one of the chances you have to take in a GPP, Ruben Randall. I know Odell Beckham Jr. is coming back, and he could eat into Randall's time, but he's a rookie, and he's the first game back. Randall's getting a ton of targets. He should have made it in the end zone last week against the Falcons. It's the highest over-under this week. The Colts and Baltimore are the second highest over-under. So I do think that he shows up this week, and he's cheap as well. My defense, I'm going for the Chargers. I think that the Jets are in disarray, and they have a chance to turn them over at home and score some points. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I agree with basically everything you've got going on there. Look, the DeMarco Murray thing, like you said, you really can't count against the guy until he gives you a reason to. He's just been gold this year. The Cowboys are the rush-heaviest team thus far. Now, we did see that the pass attack was a little bit better against New Orleans, but a lot of that probably had to do with the game plan. I mean, they knew they were going to have to stay ahead and put up points to stay up in that game. So I don't see how you can head and go against DeMarco Murray. I mean, even for the salary, like you said, he's one of those guys that he's worth it every week until he gives you a reason to start doubting him. I don't see how you can go against that. The Ruben Randall pick would be the only one, like you said. It's a calculated risk, but it is a risk. Odell Beckham is a rookie, so this week would probably be the riskiest play for either of the two because we don't know, just like the scenario we had a couple weeks ago with Emmanuel Sanders and Wes Welker. We don't know how they're both going to complement each other or fit in the game plan necessarily. So when we see that, I think we'll get a little more clarity there. But until then, you're right. I think Ruben Randall's the guy you want to roll with, at least for the safer pick. Chargers, absolutely. I've got them in a lot of lineups as well. And yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, we already talked about it. I would take him if this were a season-long draft or a redraft league. I would definitely consider Hopkins over Johnson myself for my own personal season-long team.
Yeah, for sure. He's the future over there. One other guy that we didn't talk about, which it's going to be interesting going against your lines, is Sammy Watkins. He's getting a ton of targets. He's dropping a lot of balls, but Manuel wasn't putting the ball on him nicely in stride. I mean, they were tough catches. And Orton is a good short passer, and they might have a lot of crossing routes with Sammy Watkins. He puts his body in front of the corner and could pick up some points there. So Sammy Watkins is someone I do have exposure to, and I like him this week as well.
Well, I agree with that. We talked about it. Obviously, Orton, we're a little iffy on that whole situation. But if he throws 3 interceptions, that doesn't count against Sammy Watkins. If he can only manage to put up 200 yards and 150 of those yards go to Watkins, Watkins has had a really nice day for you. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, it bodes a lot better for Watkins. And moving forward, I think in the future you're going to see him start to put up the numbers that we all maybe expected earlier on.
All right. Well, there you have it. Some winning lineups for you. Hope it helps. Hope you become the millionaire this week. You can find Jason at Fantasy Rambler. You can find us both at FF Money League and always fantasyfootballmoneyleague.com. Thanks, Jason. Good luck.
Hey, good luck to you. Thanks.
All right.